My brother mocked me for renting while he built equity. Then he missed his mortgage payments and I bought his house at auction. He asked if he could rent a room. I said the couch is taken by my dog. I'm Luke, 33, male, and this is about the most surreal, petty, and, let's be honest, satisfying chapter of my life. It started 3 years ago with a single sentence from my brother Nate, 36, male. Renting's for people who don't understand money. He said it with that smug half smile, the kind you want to wipe off someone's face with a shovel. We were standing in Mom's driveway, beers in hand, watching our parents' dog chase a squirrel. I had just mentioned I was renewing my lease on a downtown apartment. Nate laughed, looked at his wife, Kara, and said, "Guess not everyone's built for equity, huh?" It wasn't new. Nate's been like that our whole lives, always needing to be one rung higher. Growing up, if I got a B, he got an A and made sure everyone knew. If I bought a decent used car, he'd roll up a month later in something brand new, financed to the hilt. It was never about happiness, it was about winning. When he bought his house, a big two-story in a subdivision with fake ponds and community pride signs, he acted like he'd discovered fire. The first week, he threw a housewarming party just to show off. He took people on tours like it was an open house. Custom crown molding, he said, even though it was builder grade. Investment property, he bragged, even though the mortgage was 30 years of debt he barely qualified for. Meanwhile, I was working as a software engineer, saving like crazy, staying out of debt. I didn't own a home because I didn't want to yet. I liked flexibility. But Nate treated renting like moral failure. He'd text me Zillow links to starter homes and say stuff like, "You should stop wasting money." Our parents didn't help. They worshipped the idea of the American dream. Mom actually said, "Your brother's setting himself up for life, Luke. You should take notes." What they didn't know was that Nate's financial genius came with 3 maxed-out credit cards, a leased SUV, and 0 emergency savings. I knew because he'd called me once, drunk, saying he was late on his second mortgage payment and needed a temporary spot on my couch. Just in case. I laughed it off then. But that line, renting's for people who don't understand money, it stuck. It festered. Because someday, I knew the universe would balance the books. I just didn't know I'd get to help it along. The thing about Nate is, he's not evil. He's just addicted to appearances. Always has been. When we were kids, he'd fake a stomachache to get out of chores, then brag about how smart he was for gaming the system. That's Nate in a nutshell. Shortcut guy. He doesn't chase stability, he chases the image of success. Kara, 34, female, his wife, played right into it. She's the type who posts Instagram stories of candid moments, a coffee mug with perfect foam art, captioned "Morning Grind." She works in social media marketing, which is fitting because her whole life is a highlight reel. Together, they were like a walking Zillow ad with motivational quotes in the captions. Every family dinner turned into a subtle humiliation. Nate would bring up interest rates or talk about market appreciation, like he was Warren Buffett reincarnated. One Thanksgiving, he even pulled out his phone to show me how much his home had increased in value. "You wouldn't get this kind of return renting, bro," he said, half laughing, half challenging. I wanted to tell him that return doesn't mean much when your savings account is empty and your credit score's circling the drain. But I didn't. I smiled, ate my turkey, and let him have his fantasy. Then last spring, the cracks started showing. Kara posted fewer pictures of their house. No more Sunday meal prep in our dream kitchen. The captions turned vague. Things like "some weeks are tougher than others." Mom called me a few weeks later, whispering like it was classified information. "Nate's been having issues with the bank. He's a little behind, but they'll sort it out." That was her polite way of saying he'd missed 2 mortgage payments. By summer, he was calling me. "Hey man, how's work? Still doing that remote software thing?" Translation, "I need money." He danced around it for 20 minutes before finally saying, "I'm just in a temporary cash flow bind. You know how unpredictable these interest hikes have been." I almost laughed. The guy who mocked me for throwing money away renting was now begging for a loan to keep his roof. I didn't gloat, not yet. I told him I couldn't lend anything until I looked at my own budget. Truth was, I could have covered his payment easily. But something in me, some bruised part that still remembered being the little brother who always came second, wanted to see where this went. 2 weeks later, Mom called again. This time she was crying. The bank's foreclosing. They're losing the house. And for a moment, I felt conflicted. I remembered the smug smile, sure, but I also remembered being kids sneaking out past curfew, laughing so hard we couldn't breathe. Still, when you build your life out of appearances, it's only a matter of time before the scaffolding collapses. And I was about to watch his come crashing down in real time. The foreclosure didn't hit like an explosion. It was more like watching a slow-motion car crash you couldn't look away from. By mid-July, Nate and Kara were living in denial. He was still posting filtered photos of their backyard, pretending everything was fine. A grill night with my girl captioned post popped up 2 days before the official auction notice went up on the county site. He knew it was coming, he just couldn't admit it. Mom kept calling me, pleading with me to talk to my brother, as if I could somehow undo the math. "He's just under a lot of pressure, Luke," she said. "You know how hard it's been since Kara lost that influencer contract?" Right. The contract she'd bragged about for 6 months was actually a short-term social media campaign for a local boutique. It dried up when the owner realized posting latte art didn't increase sales. When Nate finally came clean, he showed up at my apartment. No call, just knocked, standing there with that fake confident grin cracked wide open. He looked smaller, like his posture had given up. His polo shirt was wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. The manicured guy who once lectured me about equity now clutching a stack of unpaid bills like a confession. "Luke, man, you know I wouldn't ask if it wasn't bad." I made coffee while he talked. Fast, desperate. Late payments, ballooning interest, property taxes. "If I can just get caught up, we'll be fine. Kara's picking up freelance stuff again. We'll bounce back." He said we'll bounce back the same way gamblers say one more hand. I wanted to believe him. Some part of me did. But then he mentioned tapping into my liquid cash. His words, not mine. "You're good with money," he said. "You could float me for a bit." And something snapped. Maybe it was every smug comment about renting. Maybe it was the years of being the less ambitious brother, but mostly, it was the quiet assumption that I'd just fix it for him. "No, Nate," I said, calm, simple. "You got yourself into this. You'll have to get yourself out." His face twisted. First shock, then anger, then humiliation. "Wow, so you're just gonna sit there and let me lose everything?" "I'm not letting you lose anything," I said. "You already did." He slammed the door so hard my neighbor texted to ask if I was okay. A week later, Mom called again. This time not pleading but accusing. "How could you let this happen to your brother?" As if I'd held the foreclosure auction myself. The night before the auction, I drove past his neighborhood. The "For Sale by Trustee" sign was out front, the manicured lawn already overgrown. There was something eerie about it. The once pristine facade collapsing into silence. And I swear, sitting there in my car watching the porch light flicker, I realized something. Nate's house wasn't a symbol of success. It was a monument to his ego. And tomorrow, that monument was going up for sale to the highest bidder, including me. The morning of the auction felt colder than it should have. Maybe it was the air conditioning in the courthouse, or maybe it was just the realization that I was about to cross a line I couldn't uncross. I didn't tell anyone I was going. Not Mom, not Dad, not even my closest friend from work. It wasn't about revenge, at least not at first. It was about taking control for once, about ending the years of being the punchline at every family dinner. When I walked into that auction room, it was mostly quiet. A few investors, one older couple who looked nervous, and a clerk reading property codes in a monotone voice. Then I saw it. Nate and Kara's address printed neat and cold on the list. Lot number 47, single-family residence, 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, initial bid $218,000. My pulse thudded in my ears. I'd already done the math. I had enough saved for a 20% down payment and pre-approval through my credit union. I'd run the numbers 3 times, even accounted for repairs and back taxes. Financially, it was sound. Emotionally, not so much. When the bidding started, the older couple dropped out almost immediately. The investors hung on longer, but I was steady. I knew my ceiling, and when the gavel finally hit at $231,000, I didn't even flinch. "Sold," the clerk said. That single word echoed like a church bell. I'd just bought my brother's house. Driving over afterward felt like watching a movie in reverse. The same streets Nate had bragged about, quiet, good schools, great for resale, looked smaller, duller now. The mailbox leaned to one side. The front flower bed was choked with weeds. I parked and walked up to the door, my name freshly inked on a deed that used to be his. The place still smelled like them, cheap cologne, Kara's vanilla candles, the faint undertone of stress. A realtor had left a lockbox, so I let myself in. Everywhere I looked, I saw ghosts of their Instagram perfect life. A whiteboard calendar with mortgage due, circled in red. A motivational quote taped to the fridge, hustle until your haters ask if you're hiring. The irony was almost painful. In the living room, there was a photo of Nate holding a beer, arm around Kara, standing right where I was. The caption in my memory was still clear. Proud homeowners. Hard work pays off. Yeah, hard work. I picked up that photo and stared at it for a long time before setting it face down. That night, after the paperwork cleared, Mom called. The house went today, she said softly. Some investor bought it. It's all so unfair. I just said, yeah, Mom, unfair. She had no idea the investor was me. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like Nate's shadow. I felt free. But freedom, I'd learned, has a funny way of turning into temptation. Because a week later, Nate called. His voice was shaky, hollow. Luke, man, we're trying to find a place. Everything's so expensive right now. I was wondering if maybe we could stay with you for a bit? And that's when the spark of revenge lit in my chest. I kept my voice calm. Sorry, Nate, the couch is taken. He hesitated. By who? I looked down at my dog, sprawled across the cushions, tail wagging lazily. My dog, I said. He's not great with guests. The silence on the line was thick, heavy, almost beautiful. Then Nate muttered something I couldn't quite catch and hung up. I set my phone down, leaned back, and scratched my dog behind the ears. Guess we're landlords now, buddy, I said. Update. Hey everyone, didn't expect this story to blow up the way it did. I figured a few people might find it mildly satisfying. Didn't think half the internet would start rooting for my dog like he's the protagonist. For those asking, his name's Baxter. He's the goodest boy. Yes, he got extra treats after that phone call. Anyway, buckle up, because things got real weird after my last post. So a bunch of you said I should have told Nate I bought the house just to watch his jaw hit the floor. And believe me, that thought crossed my mind. But I wanted to keep the upper hand a bit longer, just to see how far he'd go trying to find a place. Well, I didn't have to wait long. 2 nights after that phone call, I got a text from Kara. It was this long, guilt-trippy paragraph about families sticking together during hard times. She said they were staying in a motel off the highway and that she hated to ask, but they needed somewhere stable until things get sorted. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Part of me wanted to help, but a bigger part of me remembered every smug laugh, every dig about renting, every some of us just make better choices. Then I woke up to motion alerts on my phone. The house. My house. Someone was in the backyard. When I pulled up the camera feed, there they were, Nate and Kara, trying to open the back sliding door with a set of keys that didn't work anymore. I swear I just sat there, staring, half in shock, half in grim amusement. They looked like raccoons trying to break into their own garbage bin. Eventually, Nate noticed the camera light blinking and yelled, "I know you can see us, Luke. This isn't funny." Funny thing is, I hadn't even said a word. I called the non-emergency police line and told them someone was trespassing. When the officer showed up, I stayed parked down the street watching it play out from a distance. Kara was crying. Nate was pacing, furious. The cop talked to them for a while, then made them leave. Before driving off, Nate turned toward the camera and flipped it off. Real classy. An hour later, my phone blew up. Missed calls, voicemails, texts. First angry, then pleading, then full-on manipulation. You bought it just to humiliate me, didn't you? You're heartless. What happened to family? Then Mom called. Oh man, that conversation was a trip. She said Nate told her some stranger bought his house and was taunting him by refusing to rent it out. I told her the truth. I'm the stranger, Mom. There was this silence, thick, heavy, disbelieving. Then, Luke, how could you do that to your brother? I laughed. You mean how could I outbid the bank? She hung up on me. Since then, it's been chaos. Kara's been posting cryptic Facebook rants about toxic family members who forget their roots. Nate's been telling everyone I stole his home. And I just keep paying the mortgage, on time, in full, every month. But here's the twist none of them know yet. Next week, the renovation starts. Fresh paint, new floors, maybe even rented out to a nice couple. You know what poetic justice looks like? Turning your brother's equity palace into your investment property. I thought I'd feel guilty. I really did. But standing in that empty living room last night, watching the sunset through the same windows he bragged about, all I felt was peace. And maybe a little bit of satisfaction. I knew Nate would take it badly. I just didn't expect him to lose it. It started small, petty. A few days after the update, I drove by the house to meet the contractors. Someone had thrown fast food trash in the driveway. Half a burger, soda spilled across the concrete, a few soggy fries crushed into the curb. I didn't think much of it until I saw the note wedged in the mailbox. Hope it's worth it. You'll regret this. No signature, just that. I told myself it was a coincidence, maybe kids messing around. But the next night, I got another motion alert. This time, the footage was worse. Nate in a hoodie stomping through the side gate with a flashlight, Kara trailing behind him, whispering something sharp and frantic. He went straight for the garage door, kicked it, hard, twice. Then yelled, "This was my house!" before Kara pulled him away. I called the cops again. They came, took another report, warned me to stay away from face-to-face confrontation. But 2 days later, he showed up at my apartment. It was 10 p.m., pouring rain, and Baxter started barking before I even heard the knocking. Not polite knocks either. The kind that sound like they're trying to break through the door. When I opened it, Nate was standing there soaked through, eyes wild, hair plastered to his forehead. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. "Why?" he said. No greeting, no preamble, just why? "You bought my house, my home. You think this is funny? You think you're some kind of hero?" He stepped forward, chest puffed like he wanted a fight. I didn't move. I just said, "You mocked me for years, Nate. Told everyone I was wasting money renting. Maybe you should have been paying your bills instead of posting motivational quotes." He flinched like I'd hit him. Then he started pacing, hands in his hair, muttering, "You ruined me. Kara's gone. She took her stuff, said she can't be with someone who can't keep a roof over her head. You did this." He slammed his palm against the wall so hard it rattled a picture frame. Baxter growled low, protective. I kept my voice even. "You did this to yourself." For a second, I thought he might actually hit me. His hands were shaking, breathing ragged. Then something in him broke. The anger drained out all at once, replaced by this hollow look, like he didn't even recognize where he was. He just whispered, "I don't have anywhere to go," and walked off into the rain. I didn't stop him. The next morning, I filed for a restraining order. I didn't want to, but the footage, the threats, the way he looked, it was escalating, and I couldn't risk it. Mom called again that afternoon, voice trembling with fury. "You've destroyed this family, Luke. Your brother's a wreck. He's been staying at a friend's garage because of you." "No, Mom," I said quietly. "He's there because of him." She didn't respond, just hung up again. That night, the contractors texted me photos. Someone had spray-painted thief across the front fence in red. The security camera caught Nate's car driving away. I stared at the pictures for a long time, then exhaled slow. This wasn't about the house anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. This was about two brothers who'd been competing since birth, and one finally stopped playing the game. I cleaned up the graffiti myself the next morning. Paint thinner, gloves, and silence. Baxter sat in the truck watching me, head tilted, ears perked. By the time the sun came up, the word was gone. But the damage was already done, and Nate wasn't finished. Not even close. I thought the restraining order would calm things down. That maybe Nate would hit bottom quietly, lick his wounds, and disappear for a while. But people like Nate don't disappear. They implode loud enough for everyone to hear. A week after the vandalism, I was at the house with the flooring crew checking progress. Everything was finally starting to look good. Fresh paint, new laminate, the kind of clean slate that makes you forget how messy things got. Then I heard the door slam, the front door. At first, I thought it was the wind. Then I heard footsteps, heavy, uneven ones. Nate walked in like he still owned the place. His clothes were wrinkled, eyes bloodshot, jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. "You changed the locks," he said, voice flat. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He scanned the living room, the empty walls, the new flooring stacked by the corner. "You're gutting it? My home? You think this is funny?" The crew went silent. One guy muttered, we'll come back later, and they shuffled out fast. The second they were gone, Nate's mask cracked. "I had everything, Luke. Everything. You took it because you couldn't stand me being ahead of you." "Being ahead of me?" I said. "You were drowning, Nate. You built your whole life on debt and pride. I didn't take anything. I just stopped saving you." That's when he lunged. It wasn't a punch, not exactly. More like a shove that carried years of resentment behind it. I stumbled back, hit the edge of the counter. Baxter barked, teeth bared. "Get out," I said. "Not until you admit you did this to me," he shouted, spit flying. His voice cracked halfway through. "You wanted this. You wanted me to lose everything." "No," I said quietly. "I wanted peace. You're the one who made it war." For a second, he froze. Then out of nowhere, he started crying. Not soft tears, ugly, choking sobs that didn't sound human. He sank down on the floor right there, in the empty living room where he'd once bragged about owning property, clutching his head like he could squeeze the memories out. "I don't even know who I am without this house," he said. That line hit harder than I expected. Because beneath the arrogance, the showboating, the debt, Nate had built his identity on being the successful one, and I'd stripped that away without meaning to. He stood up, wiped his face, and glared at me one last time. "You think this makes you better? You're just as pathetic as me." Then he stormed out, slammed the door so hard a picture frame fell off the wall. I just stood there in the silence that followed, Baxter's breathing the only sound. My hands were shaking. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, furious, broken, lost. I told myself he deserved it, that he'd brought it all on himself. But somewhere in the quiet part of my mind, a different thought crept in. Maybe I didn't just buy his house. Maybe I bought his downfall. 2 days later, Mom called again. Her voice sounded small. "Luke, Nate's gone." I froze. "Gone?" She sniffled. "He left town. No one's seen him since yesterday. He quit his job, turned off his phone. Kara says he cleaned out what little money they had left." My stomach twisted. I told her I didn't know anything, because I didn't. But when I hung up, I couldn't shake the image of him standing in that empty living room, saying he didn't know who he was anymore. I sat down next to Baxter, running a hand through his fur, the weight of it all pressing down. Revenge was supposed to feel clean, cathartic. But in that moment, it felt heavy. Still, deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Because people like Nate don't just vanish. They circle back when you least expect it. Update 2. Hey everyone. Didn't think I'd be posting again, but a lot's happened. First off, thank you for all the comments, the DMs, the concern. I've read so many of your messages these past few weeks, and they hit me harder than I expected. Some of you called me a legend. Some called me cruel. One person said, "You didn't destroy him, Luke. You just stopped protecting him from himself." That one's been looping in my head ever since. Because, yeah, Nate showed back up. It's been about 6 weeks since he disappeared. Mom was a wreck, calling hospitals, cops, even posting on Facebook like he was missing. Kara moved back in with her sister and blocked me on everything. For a while, I honestly thought Nate had done something irreversible. Then last Friday, I got a knock on my door. It was him. He looked different, thinner, eyes sunken but calmer. He was holding a duffel bag that looked like it contained his entire life. I half expected him to start yelling again, but he didn't. He just said, "Can I come in?" I let him. He sat on my couch, Baxter's couch, and laughed when he saw the dog. "Still won't let anyone else sit there, huh?" It broke me a little that he remembered that. We talked for almost 2 hours, not yelling, just talking. He'd been staying at a cheap extended-stay hotel outside town, doing odd jobs for cash. He said losing the house snapped something in him, but not in the way I'd think. "I was chasing status like it could fix me," he said. "Turns out when you stop pretending to have everything, you finally realize how little you actually need." He apologized, legitimately. No excuses, no deflection. He said he'd been jealous his whole life of my calm, my independence, the fact that I didn't need validation. Said that buying the house wasn't what broke him. It was realizing I didn't need to one-up him to feel whole. Then he did something that completely disarmed me. He pulled out an old Polaroid from his bag. The two of us, maybe 10 and 13, grinning like idiots, holding up our first caught fish. "We were good once," he said quietly, "before all the competition." We sat there for a while, no words, just that heavy silence of two grown men realizing how much they'd wasted trying to beat each other instead of be brothers. Before he left, he looked at me and said, "You don't owe me anything, but if you ever rent that place out, maybe let me help fix it up. I'm good with my hands." That hit me right in the throat. I told him I'd think about it. Since then, I've been processing. The house is finished now. New floors, new paint, everything gleaming. But when I walk through it, I don't feel victorious anymore. I feel haunted. Every room carries echoes of who Nate used to be, and maybe who I was too. You guys said revenge is best served cold, but I think sometimes it just leaves you frozen. Still, when I see him trying, part of me thinks maybe this whole messy thing, the pride, the foreclosure, the humiliation, was what finally cracked us open enough to start being real. I don't know where this story ends yet, maybe with forgiveness. Maybe just distance. But for now, I'm okay letting it be what it is. A lesson in what happens when you confuse winning with healing. And for everyone asking, yeah, Baxter still has the couch. Some things don't change. A month after that night, I finally let Nate come help with the house. Not because I wanted to, honestly, but because I didn't know what else to do with all that silence between us. Every time I went over there, I could still hear the echoes of our old fights. That house didn't just hold memories, it held ghosts. His, mine, maybe both. When he showed up, he looked different again. Clean shave, new work boots, hair trimmed short. Not the same pride-swollen brother who once bragged about building equity, but someone who'd been stripped down to the studs and started rebuilding from there. We didn't talk about the past much. Instead, we worked. He patched drywall in the hallway while I painted trim. Baxter followed him around like he'd been forgiven way faster than I had. We ordered pizza, drank cheap beer, and by the end of the first day, the silence between us didn't feel like tension anymore. It just felt quiet. Halfway through sanding a door frame, Nate said something that stuck with me. "You know what killed me the most about losing this place?" he said. "It wasn't the house itself. It was realizing that everything I bragged about was just borrowed time. Debt, image, none of it was ever mine." He looked at me for a long second, then added, "But when I saw you standing here that night, I realized you'd built something real. Not a house, a life. I just couldn't handle it." I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't. I just handed him another sanding block. By the time we wrapped up for the evening, the house looked alive again. Warm, almost. Like maybe it was done being a monument to failure and ready to be something else. Nate sat on the porch steps watching the sun dip low behind the trees. "You gonna rent it?" he asked. "Thinking about it," I said. "Maybe sell eventually, maybe keep it as an investment." He nodded. "If you do rent it, don't make the same mistake I did." "What's that?" He smiled a little, tired but real. "Thinking walls can make you happy." We sat there for a long time, neither of us saying much. It wasn't forgiveness, not fully, but it was something close enough to start. A few days later, Kara called me out of the blue. Her tone was careful, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to talk to me. "I heard Nate's been helping you," she said. "He told me what happened, everything, including the couch." I laughed, surprised. "He told you that?" "Yeah. Said it was the first time he realized you didn't hate him. You just stopped letting him take." She was quiet for a moment before saying, "He's trying, Luke. For real this time." After we hung up, I walked through the house one last time that night. It looked completely different now. Not the same brag post backdrop it used to be, but something honest, lived in. I stood in the doorway of what used to be their master bedroom and thought about the first time I'd seen Nate there, holding his keys, telling me, "You should stop wasting money renting." He was right, in a twisted way. I stopped wasting money. But more than that, I stopped wasting forgiveness on people who hadn't earned it. Now he was earning it, and I guess I was learning how to give it. When we locked up for the night, Nate scratched Baxter behind the ears and said, "Guess the couch is officially off limits forever, huh?" "Pretty much," I said. He smiled. "Fair." That small word hit me harder than I expected. Fair. After everything, maybe that was the best we could hope for. A few months passed after that. The house, the fight, the chaos, it all started to fade into something softer, like a bruise that finally stops throbbing. I rented the place out to a young couple, teachers, newly married, polite as hell. When they came to sign the lease, I almost told them the story behind those walls. But then I looked at their bright, hopeful faces and decided to let the past stay buried. The house didn't need to carry our ghosts anymore. It deserved to be someone else's beginning. Nate kept showing up, though, sometimes with tools, sometimes with coffee, sometimes just to talk. He'd tell me about the odd jobs he was picking up, the small renovation projects he'd started taking on himself. For the first time in his life, he was working for something instead of just trying to look like he already had it. One morning, he dropped by while I was walking Baxter. He had this tentative grin, the kind that didn't quite know if it belonged yet. "So," he said, scratching the back of his neck, "I got hired full-time, construction company in town, benefits and everything. Guess I'm officially blue-collar like you now." I laughed, genuine this time. "Careful, you'll start liking it." "Too late," he said. Then his face went serious. I wanted to pay you back for the house thing. Not all of it. God knows I can't, but something." He handed me a small envelope. Inside was a check. Modest, but real. It wasn't about the money. It was about the gesture. "Nate," I said, shaking my head. "You don't have to—" "I do," he interrupted. "Because if I don't start taking responsibility now, I'll never stop being the guy who ruined everything." I didn't argue. I just folded the check back into the envelope and said, "Then we'll call it a start." We stood there in the crisp fall air, two brothers who'd spent most of their lives trying to outdo each other, finally learning how to just stand still. Before he left, he glanced at my apartment window, the one where Baxter was sitting on the couch, nose pressed to the glass like a sentinel. "You ever gonna let me crash there someday?" he asked, half joking. I smirked. "Couch is taken." He laughed, shaking his head. "By the dog. Yeah, I know." But this time there wasn't bitterness in it, just warmth. A week later, I went back to the house one last time before handing over the keys to the tenants. The paint had dried perfectly, sunlight spilling through the living room windows, catching the faint shine of the new floors. It didn't feel like Nate's anymore. Or mine, really. It just existed, quietly. I walked through each room. The kitchen, the hallway, the spot where he'd yelled, "You took everything from me." It felt distant now, like it happened to someone else. Then I found something I hadn't noticed before. Tucked behind a loose outlet cover in the corner of the living room, a folded scrap of paper. I opened it carefully. It was Nate's handwriting. "For whoever ends up here, don't chase what looks good on paper. Build what feels good to come home to." I stood there for a long time staring at that note, feeling something between pride and grief. Then I smiled, folded it back, and slipped it into the kitchen drawer for the new owners to find someday. Maybe they'd never understand what it meant, but I did. When I got home, Baxter jumped onto the couch and stared at me like he was waiting for something profound. I sat beside him, scratched behind his ears, and exhaled. It hit me then. I hadn't just outgrown my brother's shadow. I'd outgrown the need for revenge. Nate was out there trying. I was here, finally at peace. And the couch? Still his, as always. Some stories don't end with a clean victory. They end with people finally learning how to live without trying to win. And for the first time in my life, that was enough.